All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. It's Friday, so Friday's the day we do the free-for-all. Really excited to be talking to you, and I hope I get to talk to you directly. Please do call in. Makes my job a lot easier to have somebody, a few people, hopefully, to bounce ideas off of and try to come to some solutions to the really thorny problems that we face, the existential issues of our day. Don't forget, please do click subscribe there. I did it right. I got the subscribe button going, and click bottom right of your screen. Fridays we try to revisit stories from the whole week rather than focus on any one topic, and that will be the case today. There's your thumbnail for today's program. The honeymoon's not the funny moon, not the funny moon. The honeymoon's over, and I'm at my honeymoon period with Kamala. I don't know if I really had ever had a honeymoon, but I was like, and I've said this several times, and it's still kind of sort of true, although it's pretty much not true anymore. But I've said, hey, there's a chance I could be persuaded to vote for Kamala Harris. She might win me over, and I'd say the odds of that have become very, very low. They're not completely gone, but they're awfully close, and we'll get into that in just a moment. It relates, of course, directly, we'll get into it right now. It relates directly to my sense that our support, the United States government's support via the Biden administration of Israel's genocide in Gaza is a moral crisis that is of such magnitude that one cannot simply vote for. One cannot support a leader who backs that. It's just that evil. I think we're looking at a 21st century Holocaust. I don't think that's an unfair comparison. There are Holocausts. That is the Shoah, the Nazi murder of the Jewish population in Europe, and not just Jews, but more Jews than any other group. This seems to be, in many ways, it's not identical, but it's similar enough. And there are survivors of the Shoah who have said that, yeah, this is what the Nazis did, what the Israelis are doing to the Palestinians, and most particularly the Gazans, is what the Nazis did to the Jews. Nazis did to us. And there you see Kamala Harris, the vice president, the putative Democratic nominee for president, the one that many of you are insisting that everyone vote for. She's meeting with the architect of the genocide in Gaza, Netanyahu. So, I just can't say, okay, well, Trump's even worse, and maybe he is worse on this issue, on Israel-Gaza. Maybe his rhetoric is worse, but as long as we support what Israel's doing, or as long as the candidate that I'm asked to vote for is supporting what Israel is doing, logistically, materially, refuses to say no, refuses to say stop, I can't vote for that person. And you can see Kamala, honestly, I don't doubt, or let me say it this way, I do doubt how morally committed she is to Israel. No, she said that she had, in her childhood, there was a real affinity that she was raised to feel for the state of Israel. She may or may not call herself a Zionist, but you can tell from that picture. Let me actually put it back up for one more second. If you look at her face, she's probably feeling a little queasy. She's like, yeah, this ain't the guy I really want to be pictured with. I don't even feel good about it. But you know what? That doesn't feed the bulldog. That doesn't save any Palestinian lives. The only thing that saves Palestinian lives is, hey, we're cutting you off. No more weaponry, my man. And guess what else? We support the charges being leveled against you by the International Criminal Court. We're going to swear it on, I don't know if she has the power to do that, but to push for his arrest, right? To push for the use of military force against the Israeli military. And I get there are political considerations, but you know what? This is a moral crisis. This is for the Palestinian people, this is an existentialist threat. I can't support Kamala Harris given her current stance, given what she seems to be, behind, which is the Israeli genocide. So let's get a little more details of that. Democracy Now, as they are so often want to do, really covering this well. Let me take my face off. I'll give you that. There it is. There's Democracy Now. Let me take my face off that screen there. We're going to play this and just, people know this is wrong. This is from today's Democracy Now. I would just note, I always, or pretty much always, give you the latest murder count in Gaza, how many new people, how many new deaths have been identified in Gaza over the past 24 hours. Couldn't get that information on either Al Jazeera or one of the other aggregators, the state websites, the state news websites from the Middle East. I think I saw 18 killed in Khan Yunis in the past 24 hours, but the total number of dead that was posted at Al Jazeera was 39,175, which is the same number as yesterday. So I don't have a new death count. I know there are more dead, more being discovered. There's a recent report out that I think it was the Lancet, maybe it was BBC, examined the numbers that had come out from the Palestinian Ministry of Health in the first few months and concluded that they were, very accurate. They could confirm 75% of the deaths. There were 25 they couldn't confirm, but that didn't mean that they didn't happen. They just couldn't confirm them. So we know the death toll is very, very high. And what doctors are telling us is that it's a lot higher than even the extraordinary, the horrific numbers we're hearing about. So let's play a little bit from Democracy Now.
You can start off by talking about the conditions and what you are calling on President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris to do right now.
The conditions in Gaza were unacceptable and really difficult. We had no soap to wash our hands in the hospital, no drapes, no sterile gowns. We would go to work and the nurses would say, we don't even have water to drink. So you can imagine the situation for the patients who would walk an hour to the hospital, pregnant patients. Patients with suspected cancer would be walking to the hospital or taking 3 hours to get there because of transportation issues. There's no sanitation. It's unbelievable, the situation over there.
Talk specifically about what women face. You are an obstetrician gynecologist.
Yes. The pregnant women we've had, when I was there in just a week, we had 4 deaths, fetal deaths, because we were unable to monitor the babies. They didn't have any monitors to monitor.
Let me just underline that. So 4 fetal deaths because they just couldn't monitor the babies correctly. People with cancer walking to the hospital, taking hours to get there. That's what this doctor, this obstetrician is telling us. It's so horrific. I mean, this is, just these little details. And the background is always thousands, tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of dead by Israel, at the hands of Israel, just since October 7. It's so wrong. It's so awful. This really is the moral crisis of our time. And, we, in many ways, the United States got some things right in the 1940s. Ultimately, we stood against fascism. We did some things really badly. We incarcerated Japanese Americans wrongly. It was a horrible thing that we did, but we didn't kill them the way Israel is killing Gazans. We did turn away some Holocaust potential survivors, and we sent them back into the inferno. of Nazi Germany. So we did some things that were really wrong, but in the end we fought against the genocidal state, right? We provided arms, lend-lease to the beacon of democracy on the continent. I know there's all people say, oh, England was awful too, and this and that. The beacon of democracy on the continent, the United Kingdom, we supplied with weaponry. In this genocide, we are supplying the perpetrator. And it's not just Joe Biden. It's the entire Democratic Party that is supporting this genocide, with maybe one exception, Rashida Tlaib. We already have AOC, Bernie, both endorsed Genocide Joe. Both have come out in support of Kamala. And that's just not acceptable. It's morally bankrupt behavior by them.
To women in labor. And so, we've had, fetal deaths. We also had women coming to the hospital delayed with abruption, placenta, and babies dying, women experiencing severe wound infections, and then going to the ICU and being reoperated because, of the sanitation and lack of sterility.
You address this letter not only to President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, but also to Dr. Jill Biden, right, the First Lady, Doctor of Education. Why did you add her as well?
I added her because, the whole infrastructure in Gaza is destroyed. We have, children not being in school for 9 months. We have medical students not being able to complete their studies. The universities have been bombed. So with education being important to Dr. Biden, I think this is why we addressed her.
Let me bring Dr. Feroz Sidwa into this conversation. Thanks for joining us once again. We spoke to you right after you had been at European Hospital in.
So I'm playing a lot of the video here from today. This is Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman. I don't always love what Amy Goodman does. I get Aaron Mate has been critical of her, and I think rightly so, for presenting to a significant degree without skepticism, the Russiagate conspiracy theory, which proved to be a hoax, proved to be false, proved to be what the was the fever dreams of the Hillary Clinton campaign to try to dodge responsibility. So I'm not saying Amy Goodman is anywhere perfect. I know Aaron Mate's also pointed out that Goodman refused to really point out the very significant questions, the very important questions that were raised by the allegation, not proven, that Bashar Assad had gassed his own people, which was used, I think, around 2013, 2014 by the Obama-Biden administration to justify killing Syrians. And she, bought that story hook, line, and sinker, even though the evidence has over time weakened in support of the claim that Assad gassed his own people. So I'm not perfectly in sync with Amy Goodman by any means, but the moral crisis of our time right now is the Israeli genocide in Gaza. And crisis is actually not even strong enough to describe it, but it's the word we have. So she's centering it, and she's talking to people who are there, who can describe for you what is happening, what Israel is doing to the people of Gaza. So thank you, Amy Goodman.
Khan Yunis. Talk about the organizing of this letter and the significance of what happened this week, right? You have President Biden stepping aside in the presidential race, Kamala Harris being the presumptive nominee. And yesterday, if you can respond to what she said, and if you feel that there's a difference in Kamala Harris's approach to what's happening in Gaza. She skipped Netanyahu's joint address to Congress. She would have presided over it, but she wasn't alone. She joined about 100 Congress members and senators in skipping that event.
All right, so you can see there Goodman carrying a little water for Harris. You know, the reason she didn't go, the primary reason, was she had a campaign event. She's running for president. She wants to be president. She doesn't want to interrupt her campaigning. But also, she recognized that if she had attended that event, it would have sent a message that would have offended those of us who care about humanity. Not that she herself cares, but that she would have offended those of us who care. So I give her very little credit, very marginal credit for that. I think that Goodman's wrong there to suggest that Harris's refusal to preside over the congressional meeting with Netanyahu is somehow a point in her favor. I think she's wrong. I think Goodman is wrong to suggest that. Let's hear what her guest has to say.
Do you feel a different message is being sent?
Yeah, thanks for having me again. So the organizing of the letter, the organizing of the letter, a lot of American physicians have been to Gaza since October 7th and plenty before that too, but we wanted to focus on the conditions since October 7th. And we basically all saw the same thing. You know, the medical community isn't that big. We all talk to each other. Actually, I met Thalia just because she randomly happens to be married to a buddy of mine from high school. So, you know, there's kind of these connections just blossomed. And it was very clear to us that we all basically saw the same thing. We all saw evidence of a death toll that is certainly much higher than what is reported by the Gaza Ministry of Health.
All right, so I want to stop it there. That's a really important detail. The death toll, and this is something I discussed with Arlen, I believe it was, 2 weeks ago. I had made the point that the death toll from the Ministry of Health is almost certainly understating the true nature of the atrocities. And Arlen was skeptical. So, wait a second, this is Hamas that's telling us the numbers. You can't believe Hamas. They're going to exaggerate. They're on the side of the terrorists, the Palestinians. Not that, and Arlen's very quick to say, no, but it's wrong what Israel's doing. But still, Hamas is an evil group. They're not reliable. There's nothing good to be said about Hamas. What this doctor is saying is what the Lancet has said, what BBC has said, what the UN has said. No, the death toll is actually worse. The Ministry of Health in Palestine is being very responsible and conservative. It's only reporting deaths it can confirm, and that are directly the result of the Israeli military. But in fact, what Dr. Sidwa is saying here is it's much worse. It's much worse. This is a genocide that Israel is responsible for. There's no question about it. The argument is over. The confirmed number of dead is north of 39,175 at Israel's hands, at the direct hands of Israel. How many were killed by Hamas? About 1,180. No, I'm not dismissing that. That's a significant number. That was a crime. They did commit a crime. I'm loath to be nearly as harsh on Hamas because this is, again, the representative of an oppressed people, a persecuted minority. If you had, and I think in Nat Turner's rebellion, the slave rebellion was it 1830, I believe? They killed maybe 30, 40 slave owners and their families. Maybe there were some innocent non-slave owners? I don't think so, who were killed. And, the reprisals were atrocious, and hundreds were killed in response. Hundreds of slaves were murdered in response by their enslavers. So I'm loath to condemn, I would not condemn the victims, that is the rebellious slaves. And I'm very loath to condemn Hamas. What they did was wrong, it was a crime, but the response by Israel dwarfs what Hamas did. And moreover, what Hamas did can't be viewed in a vacuum. We have to look at it in decades and decades and decades of killing, land theft, daily persecution, humiliation of the Palestinian people by Israel.
Which is not unusual in wartime at all, but for unusual reasons here. We all saw the targeting of our own healthcare worker colleagues, which really struck us as being unconscionable and just utterly unacceptable.
So again, he's saying they all saw, all the doctors, the people who were there to provide humanitarian relief, they were targeted by the Israeli military. I don't even know, did the Nazis shoot the Red Cross teams? Every now and then, a Red Cross team would go into a concentration camp. I think there was one model camp. Every now and then there might be a protest. Somebody would say, well, this isn't really right what you're doing to murder all these people, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. It's not right. Stop it. I don't know. Did the Nazis kill those people? They might have. I really don't know. But this is what Israel's doing. Anyone who's trying to help the victims, their victims, gets targeted.
And we all saw the violence directed against children specifically, and the way that the violence impacts women, and especially pregnant women, like Thalia was saying.
All right, so I'm going to stop it there because it's just too painful. And the point is made. You can go to Democracy Now! And find that video. It's very, very powerful. My conclusion I've said this before, we've lost our way. We've become I hate to say it, and I was not criticized, but questioned by a very loyal viewer saying, hey, there's good people in the United States. 100% there's great people in the United States. I'll bet there's great Israelis. But what the government is doing is wrong. It's evil. And we have a moral duty to say no. We have a moral duty to say no. All right, is she saying no? Is Kamala Harris saying no? That seems to me the litmus test. And if you want to say, well, even if she's not great, we have our issues with Kamala, the squad is good, right? The squad is good. No, you know what? Ilhan Omar, she's Muslim. She's endorsed Joe Biden. She's endorsed Kamala Harris. How good can you be if you endorse people who are behind this genocide, who are standing there and saying it's okay? Hey, listen, give me a call, 240. I know many of you disagree. 240-242-5646. I'm not going to spend the whole program on this, but this is the moral issue of our time. Next week, Carlos joins us. Carlos Childs, friend of the show. He is going to be discussing this with me. He's more, I think I'm giving this away, but it's all right. He's more disgusted by Harris than I am. So you'll hear that. Let me just play a little bit, because this to me is why how could I vote for her? I can't vote for her right now based on this.
So I just had a frank and constructive meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu. I told him that I will always ensure that Israel is able to defend itself, including from Iran and Iran-backed militias such as Hamas and Hezbollah.
All right, I'm going to stop it there. So this is how she opens her speech. This is from Fox. I wanted to use the CNN clip because it's a little cleaner. It doesn't have all the Fox, it doesn't have all that promotions. It just has a little CNN logo. So I would have preferred to use it, but they're exactly the same. They just have some, different iconography using their software. But she starts, I assured him we're going to defend you. We're going to protect you from Iran. Which is their biggest fear, right, is Iran is going to hit them. The Houthis who are getting support from Iran hit them. That's the wrong message. You started with the absolute worst possible message. What you should have said to Netanyahu is, hey, we can't support you. You're bringing this on yourself by your genocide. No, we can't support you anymore. She said, we always will be there for you. Always. What the hell is the matter with, how can this be okay, folks? Let's play that again. We'll always, I want to make sure I got that right.
So I just had a frank and constructive meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu. I told him that I will always ensure that Israel is able to defend itself, including from Iran and Iran-backed militias such as Hamas and Hezbollah.
Always from Hamas, right? So everything else that comes after that, it's nothing. It's guidelines. If we're always going to ensure you have that military strength of the United States behind you, what does anything else matter? It doesn't. It's so wrong. And it breaks my heart. I told you one of my loyal listeners, viewers said, hey, you're too down on America and Americans. I'm down on people who don't get this is wrong. This is just utterly evil. That's what I'm down on. Who think, oh, thank God we've got Kamala. And by the way, there's a very good chance she's going to be the next president. A very, very good chance. It's not like Trump. I mean, the polls have tightened significantly. It sure looks like a dead heat in the popular vote. So right now, probably Trump's favored by a little, but it's really, really, really close. Let me play just a little more of this, but then we're going to move on.
From when I was a young girl, collecting funds to plant trees for Israel, to my time in the United States Senate and now at the White House, I have had an unwavering commitment to the existence of the State of Israel, to its security, and to the people of Israel. I've said it many times, but it bears repeating.
I just don't understand this. Why are they the ones for whom she has an unwavering commitment when it's clearly now Israel or Palestine? Well, it's not Israel or Palestine. It's Israel killing Palestinians, Gazans, slammed that. We already putting them in a concentration camp between the sea and the desert. Why aren't you committed to the lives of the Palestinian people? Why are the Israelis so important to you that you can't even say no? We're not gonna ensure your safety when you're murdering an entire group of people. But you can't say it. And to me, how could I support that person? How could you support that person? So it's not just her speech, right? I mean, that's bad, but it's not just her support of Netanyahu. I mean, that's hugely problematic. But condemns pro-Hamas protesters. And were they pro-Hamas or were they just pro-Palestine? Hamas represents Palestine. She can't condemn genocide. She can't say the word genocide. She can't condemn Israel, an occupying force. But she can condemn the protesters. And there's more. So I thought this was a really interesting piece in The Nation magazine by, let's face it, a hack. Somebody who's a neo-lib. She's clearly a Democratic establishment tool, Joan Walsh. And it's not so favorable towards Kamala. It really isn't. This is July 24. She's apparently, Walsh apparently, and she was all in for Hillary, big Hillary Clinton supporter, big Joe Biden supporter, doesn't like Bernie. She had a famous column, Bernie Sanders supporters, get off my lawn, something like that. That was in The Nation, which The Nation should never have given her a byline, but they did, so whatever. But apparently when Walsh was a little more progressive 20 plus years ago, she covered Kamala when she was the San Francisco DA. And it didn't go well, right? I mean, it wasn't a great interview. Walsh was a little bit more of a journalist at that point. She was a little more prepared to take on power and ask uncomfortable questions. And Harris didn't like it. And so I think that little tension continues to this day. So from the Nation article that came out on the 24th, after Harris became the putative nominee for the Democrats, but this was, the column came out, the piece came out of the Nation by Walsh after Walsh had been nominated or had gotten the endorsement of Biden. Biden had stepped down. But she wrote the piece. She did her research well before. So she did her research when Walsh did her interviews, her conversations with Harris and others before, when Harris wasn't the nominee. She was the vice president candidate. So she was told, and Walsh makes it very clear, here's some don'ts. You don't get to ask these questions. Don't ask these questions of Harris. They might be embarrassing, so don't ask them. So do not ask if there's any daylight between Harris and the president over Israel's. And even her language, right? I mean, I'm glad she did this piece. I think it's instructive. I think we learn about Kamala Harris here. But what Walsh tells us is don't ask her if there's daylight, if there's any difference between her and the president over Israel's brutal retaliation against Hamas. By the way, I don't like it. Ironically, I'm using the word like. Even here, Walsh is giving Israel a little bit of slack. Brutal retaliation, as though what Israel is doing now, killing 39,000 plus. And it's really much more. We already heard from the doctors early in the program, as though it's a retaliation. It's not. It's a genocide. What happened on October 7 is the pretext for mass murder by Israel. It's not retaliation. It's a pretext for mass murder. But guess what? There's no difference on policy. And what's the Joe Biden policy? We're all in for Israel. And Kamala just told you that. I'll always ensure Israel's protection. Always. So there's no difference. Yeah, there's a little better rhetoric, maybe, but there's no difference. So she acknowledges it. I mean, Walsh doesn't. Walsh is going to, I'm sure support it. Now, you might say support. Walsh will, ultimately, I'm sure support Harris, because even if she doesn't love Harris personally, even if there's animus between them, which there is, Walsh hates Trump. She really hates Trump. She's a Democratic Party hack. That's who she is. So she's going to support the Democratic Party hack nominee. Some may say, well, Harris has no choice, right? She has to support Israel unwaveringly. Well, we see that's not the case. I sometimes say Israel's our our closest ally, or at least identified as such. We have two sort of closest allies, Israel and Great Britain, the United Kingdom, England, whatever you want to call them. England is part of Great Britain, the island of Great Britain, and then the United Kingdom's even more, Northern Ireland, whatever. So here's from the Times of London today. The new Labour government, Keir Starmer, Britain expected to drop case against Benjamin Netanyahu arrest warrant. So it's a double negative there. But what they're saying is, hey, we're not going to fight any attempt to hold Netanyahu responsible for genocide. Nope. We're good with it. We accept. We agree. We are good with the ICC's arrest warrant application. And basically what Starmer's saying is, you come to England, you come to the United Kingdom, you come to Scotland, what have you, we're going to arrest you, man. Now, I don't know if he's really going that far, but he's saying we're not going to defend this guy anymore. We're done. So England, right, the cradle, are they the cradle of democracy? I think we're the cradle of democracy. We became the cradle of democracy when we broke away from the monarchy. They're saying no, there's a rule of law. And we're saying, up yours, rule of law. Our guy, there he is, standing with the Veep. There's the American flags and the Israeli flags right sandwiched amongst each other. We got his back. Now, I mentioned earlier, she could be the president. You know, I was of the mind, I won't say I got this wrong, but I did not think Kamala Harris would likely be a better or stronger candidate than than Biden. I never said, and I didn't believe she couldn't win. But what I did believe is that she wasn't popular. She wouldn't be strong in the Great Lakes states, which are the key to victory in this, at least they have been the last few elections. So, and in other states that Democrats have done pretty well in lately, like Arizona especially, I did not view her as likely to be that strong. But I really thought her weakest states would be the Midwest, right? And I don't have the polls. I'm not going to show you the polls for Pennsylvania. I think Pennsylvania is almost a dead heat right now. Wisconsin, dead heat right now. So she very well might be the next president. And I suppose, let me just get that so you don't see that weird stuff. I suppose, on balance, she wouldn't be quite as bad as Trump. Although, J.D. Vance has said we shouldn't be I think I talked about this yesterday, in Ukraine. And it's hard to imagine Trump being worse on Israel than somebody who says, I told the Prime Minister, Netanyahu, will always have his back. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to see how you could be much worse than that. So it's super close. Look at this. There's one there that's +7. That totally skews it by Rasmussen, which is not reliable, not a good pollster. All the others are good pollsters. CNN has the best lead for Trump, best news for Trump. There's +3. New York Times +1. Reuters, they're decent pollster, +2 for Harris. Quinnipiac is a very good pollster, +2. Now, will this turn around a little bit? One of the things that, if I'm on the Trump team, I'm especially concerned about is there's not going to be another Republican convention. The Republican convention did well for Trump. He got a nice boost out of it. That's done. You're not going to get that boost again. I didn't cover it. I don't care about that stuff. That's irrelevant to me. But the fact of the matter is they got a pretty good boost. And the Democrat conventions come out. It's going to be a coronation, a love fest. It shouldn't be, but it will be for Harris. So this is somebody who is likely going to be, well, very possibly going to be the next president. If I were AOC, if I were Joe Biden, if I were, Bernie Sanders. Well, let me say it differently. If I had a commitment to poor, struggling, and working people, if I had a commitment to the victims of empire, now AOC and Bernie don't. If they're relatively powerful people. They have followings. I would go, if I had a following, I'd say to Harris, you've got to be willing, you've got to state out loud that Israel's actions in Gaza are unacceptable. That you will stand up to Israel. And I would take on AIPAC immediately. I would say, I get it. AIPAC's not going to like this. They're going to go after me. But the fact is, that there are some things that are just too important to stay silent. We cannot stay silent. Never again. And then have Bernie and AOC and all the surrogates come out and say, she's so brave. That would be bravery. People saying, oh, Joe Biden's so brave because he finally bent the knee to Obama and Nancy Pelosi, who said, you got to get out. That's not so brave. You got to enjoy 4 years of quietude. But bravery is standing up to AIPAC. Let's see if she has that bravery. I'm almost certain she does. Wanted to get to this story. Moving on. It's a free-for-all. I've spent most of the time talking about Israel. I know. Sorry about that, folks, if you didn't want to hear about it, but that's what matters right now. But one of the posts that I got, and I'm always curious when I posted Halitics, if you're not, by the way, if you're not on our Facebook, in our Facebook group, Halitics, please join. And anyone can, I believe. I don't think there's any, you just join. I mean, it's just that simple. Maybe I have to approve you, but I don't even think I have to do that. And some of the posts get ignored. I'm always a little surprised or confused. I never quite know why some posts kind of get viral, more responses than others. And I'm often disappointed because posts that I think are really important, like about, the death toll, the death count in Gaza, or for that matter, Ukraine. The fact that peace was possible in Ukraine, and then it was completely, it was let go. We kiboshed it in 22 with the help of Tory Boris Johnson, and nobody seems to care about that, right? But this post that I put up a couple weeks ago in response to the shooting of Trump, there's been a lot of responses. So I just said, hey, if you want to point fingers, but everyone's blaming the Democrats or the rhetoric in the media, the reckless rhetoric about how Trump's a tyrant, that's what caused the killing, the shooting, rather, of Trump. And my response was, hey, if you want to blame someone, blame the NRA. They're the ones who have spent, I would assume, it's certainly many, many millions, tens of millions, hundreds, maybe $1 billion to guarantee that we're all at risk of getting killed in a mass shooting or being shot by some, crazed person waving a handgun. So seems to me they're the obvious culprit. And this got a big, big response. And some people agreed, but a lot of people didn't. So I'm always glad that any posts get a response. I prefer if there's both sides, not just everyone agreeing. And so that's what happened here. And one of our more conservative or a conservative poster, who I really appreciate, by the way, I always block their names out. You can always, if you want to find out who the people are who are posting these, just go to Halitics on Facebook. Just join the group. Just Google or stick Halitics in the search engine. I should say it's not Google, it's Facebook search engine. Just put Halitics in the search engine and you'll find it. So in response, this was I guess there was all this back and forth about how the shooter, Thomas Crooks, was really a lefty because he had given $25 to Act Blue, which is supposedly some progressive group. It's not. Act Blue is just purely a Democratic fundraiser. They raise money for every Democrat. It is not in any way progressive by any means. It's not like they raise money for the Squad or their Progressive Blue or anything like that. It's just Act Blue. It's just for Dems. So the response was, because conservatives don't want to blame the NRA. The conservatives in general support the NRA. They believe in the Second Amendment. They want to make it as easy as possible for people to get guns, for themselves to get guns. So they don't want, they are very loath to accept the argument that easy access to guns could have been what caused the shooting of Trump. And it seems so obvious that they are. So they're going to blame media. And here was this post. Well, it turns out the shooter, Crooks, was a left-wing Biden supporter. What a surprise. And then they linked to a YouTube video. So I really wanted to respond to that. I looked into the video. I didn't really play it. I looked at it. I looked in parts of it. But the support, the evidence that was provided on the video for the claim that the shooter was a left-wing Biden supporter. And by the way, be real clear, that's an oxymoron. If you're left-wing, you're not a Biden supporter. If you're left-wing, you don't give a blank check to Israel. If you're left-wing, you don't greenlight the Mountain Valley Pipeline, the Willow Creek Project. If you're, left-wing, you're for workers. You don't prevent them from going on strike. So Joe Biden ain't no left-winger. If you're supporting Joe Biden, you ain't left-wing. But was the shooter even a Biden supporter? Apparently he gave that money to ActBlue, that we have had confirmed. He also was a registered Republican. He gave the money to ActBlue when he was 17 years old. This guy, Andrew Torba, who apparently ran a social media site, or maybe still does, called Gab, posted, maybe it was yesterday, maybe, I guess, recently, that the shooter, Thomas Crooks, who he describes as a deranged Joe Biden supporter. We don't know he's a Joe Biden supporter. He gave the money to ActBlue, that's all we know. May have had an account. It's not determined. We are unable to confirm that the account in question actually belonged to him. So whatever evidence Torba provides may or may not even relate to Crooks, first of all. Second of all, it was last active more than 3 years ago, 2021, early 21, when the shooter was not, he wasn't even 18, he was 21. He's 20 now. So he was 17 at the time, 16 or 17. I believe he was 17 at the time. How is this somehow evidence of anything? It's not. It's not. If we assume for the moment that this guy Crooks was even the source of the tweets or posts at the website, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that he shot Trump because he wanted Joe Biden. I mean, it means nothing. There's no violent rhetoric in any of the posts, but let me put them up here for. All he does, if it's him, and I don't want to say it is because how do I know? But Torba even acknowledges we can't confirm this is from Crooks. He just says, yeah, you were wrong when you said Biden would lose in a landslide. And then he's defending some of the Biden executive orders as not incentivizing human trafficking. And then he says, hey, the undocumented immigrants are not committing crimes. That's it. There's no violent rhetoric. There's nothing. And if anything, it would seem unlikely that these measured comments, these measured social media posts came from a guy who was a shooter. And also, we'll get into who he was according to people who knew him in high school. But okay, so let's assume that these posts were from Crooks. He says, yeah, Biden's making it a little easier for some immigrants to become U.S. citizens. And he's also pointing out that Biden was more popular, that the allegate in 2020. I mean, this is not in any way reflecting or reflective of some crazed, deranged person. It's actually true. I mean, what is attributed to the shooter is just facts. But we don't even know if it was him. Now, a much more responsible story came out of the USA Today. I thought they did a good job of this. Current signs don't point to partisanship as Trump shooter's motive, despite Republican claims. And you have to look at the Republican claim. Why are they saying it's partisanship? Well, there's certainly gamesmanship politics. Look at how they're always criticizing us. We're gun nuts. We're pro-violence, which is true to a degree. but it doesn't tell the whole story. So, let's blame them. Let's say it's all on the left. But what the USA Today is saying, hey, we don't have evidence that that's true. Here's what we do have. Here's what we do know. There was a dozen guns in that guy's house. More than a dozen guns. And you can, this is from actually NBC. And you can see the bloody ear. I mean, he looks pretty like a mess, man. Authorities haven't yet determined a motive. They still don't know why. But he's dead, the gunman. He was using an AR-style rifle, like I'm not a gun guy. I don't really know what all that means. But, these are one of those weapons that really seem to have no legitimate purpose but to kill people. And I saw some gun experts saying it wasn't even a good weapon for the guy to use if he'd been using a rifle with a better sight and he had any real training, probably, would have killed Trump. There's no reason for anyone to have a gun like this, except if you want to have it on a range, I have no problem. Keep it at a range. Keeping a gun locker at your range. It doesn't serve any other real legitimate purpose except to fire off a lot of rounds at one time. There were 12 of them in his house. How come authorities didn't know about that? Did they know about that? Why are people just allowed to stockpile weapons? What the hell's going on? This is a house with a 20-year-old. He's not even old enough to drink, right? But he's old enough to have, it's crazy. That's why this happened. Not because 3 years ago, he might have expressed some empathy for immigrants. And what were this guy's politics? He was a conservative. As far as anyone has come up with, he was a conservative. Yeah, he gave that $25 or whatever to Act Blue. Not a progressive group by any means. Former high school classmate said, yeah, he was conservative. He always was on the conservative side. His friends were conservative. And it doesn't matter to me, but the real issue is gun availability. It's just that simple. But if you're going to present a narrative that this is somehow a deranged liberal, well, I'm going to debunk it because it ain't true. All right, we still got a few more minutes for your calls. If you want to join me, 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646. That's the number, 240-242-5646, always on your screen. So I also added as one of the topics, trains and planes. I was intrigued by this story. Paris Olympics opening up now. I fear it's going to be super hot because of the climate cataclysm, the climate catastrophe, which as far as I know, Harris hasn't weighed in on, hasn't made any comments about. I mean, I don't think she's expressed any, initiative or any effort to, keep it in the ground, stop our consumption. That's the only way to end the climate catastrophe. I'm not aware of her talking about that. That's a big, that's the second most important issue in this moment after the genocide in Gaza, and probably for the future of humanity, the most important issue. So there's arson attacks. I saw on the Times of London that some of the commenters there showing just as much intelligence, just as much understanding of the issues of the day, blaming it on Russia or Islamists. There's no evidence to support that. We don't know what caused the arson attacks. There was significant damage to the trains. I wonder why they aren't better protected. This is what the Independent said. I think it's very interesting. I just wanted to put this in there and just show you again how the media tries so hard to manipulate you to be, say, a Russophobe, right? A Russian hater. So, and it's in pink, the Russian, because I put that in the search engine Russian, so it highlighted it. So the Independent is saying, yeah, a Russian man was suspected, a 40-year-old Russian man suspected of planning to sabotage the games was arrested on Wednesday, but the police have not publicly stated any link. So they don't think that was the cause. And then the BBC also reporting, this is even more fascinating to me. In the recent weeks, Russia has been linked to at least 2 alleged plots in France. Last month, a Russian-Ukrainian national was arrested as being part of a Russian sabotage campaign. Now, I'm just curious, is it a Russian sabotage campaign or is it a Ukrainian sabotage campaign? Because he's a Ukrainian too. He's a Russo-Russian-Ukrainian. So which is it? Is he plotting sabotage on behalf of Ukraine or on behalf of Russia? I just wonder, because, and it could well be Ukraine. Remember, France just had these elections. The left won in large part because of very significant dissatisfaction in France with Macron, the president's very pro-US, very pro-NATO, very pro-intervene in Ukraine-Russia war. Even going so far as saying maybe we need French boots on the ground, the last thing the French want. So with the triumph of the left, which has still been unable to form a government, right? We don't know where they're going to go. It's very possible that Ukraine is trying to stir up anti-Russia sentiment in France and get the left to govern with respect to the Russia-Ukraine war, similarly to Macron, to support troops, or at least more weapons, more money going to the Ukraine army, Ukraine military. It's all up in the air. We don't know. It also wouldn't make sense, would it, for Russia, at a point when it looks like the French government may become less antagonistic towards Russia, less threatening towards Russia? It wouldn't make sense, would it, for Putin to stir up trouble? That would be strange, in my opinion. So we just don't, but let's all just speculate. We just have no idea what this is all about. What we do know is our infrastructure is vulnerable. And it was made really clear to me how vulnerable it is, our transportation infrastructure. The saboteurs in France burned some electrical wires, started fires at electrical, sites where that power the train. So if you burn up those cables, you obviously can't run a train. There's no juice. It's interesting. It's sort of an old school, right? It's old school sabotage. It's not software. It's not crashing computers. It's just taking the actual physical power supply, the generators, and severing them from the tracks. The more 21st century sabotage that we saw, and I guess it wasn't really sabotage, it was just a computer crash. This CrowdStrike software crash that brought down many airlines this past Friday, 1 week ago. A lot of planes were grounded. A few actually were grounded into Saturday. I was very interested in the fact that last Friday, apparently there were no Southwest Airlines flights that were sidelined, that were grounded. And the reason for this, this may not be correct, but I think it is, Southwest Airlines has never updated from Windows 95. Apparently their system runs on Windows 95. People often say you can't use dated software, you can't use it's too risky, it's not protected. In this case, using the old Windows 95 was really good for Southwest. I know the scapegoat for all this is CrowdStrike, and yes, it was a CrowdStrike update that crashed all those airline computers. But I put it all on Windows in the end. One vendor, CrowdStrike, one partner, one Microsoft partner, should not have the ability to crash a computer or to crash a whole set of computers, a whole system of computers, to ground airlines. That has got to be on Microsoft. And this I say, hey, we need to move. We absolutely must move to open source. All this stuff is hidden. We don't know, some hacker gets in there, some disgruntled former Microsoft employee knows a weakness, knows a backdoor in the Microsoft code, and they can take down everything practically because we're so dependent on this for-profit closed source software. It's a terrible problem, and the solution is clear. Move to open source. And if the US government got behind Linux, they could so easily create a much, much tighter, safer system. Linux is largely containerized, so and what that just means is that it can be containerized. Containers cause problems too sometimes, but the great advantage of a container is anything that CrowdStrike does is just limited to the CrowdStrike container, and it won't mess up the rest of your system. When a computer user needs to access the CrowdStrike software, then CrowdStrike runs within its container. Period. It doesn't impact on the other software. That's a huge advantage that Linux has. Windows doesn't. But we're beholden to a for-profit corporation, Windows, and we have all the problems that directly result from that. It shouldn't be that way. All right. I appreciate Shade's posts, Shade's chats. Did have a few other comments. I think it's been over an hour I've been doing this program. I had some other topics, but you know what? I'm just going to wish you all a great weekend. Thanks for watching Halitics. Thanks for being part of the program. Again, I just want to communicate with you. My favorite way to do it is when I do my live stream is to talk to you. But if you don't want to call in, I get it. A great place to post is Halitics. And when I say Halitics, I mean the Facebook group. I know Shade has trouble. He often comments. It's challenging to get comments on the YouTube channel, and I understand that's the case. YouTube is pretty. They're great for me to distribute this live stream. I've never had any problem with them. I think there was one thumbnail I used they didn't like. I replaced it, but they're not great sometimes about the comments. So the best place for you to comment is Halitics group on Facebook, and I'll see it. That's where I spend more time anyway than on the comments of my program. I'll see you all Monday. It will be a Monday with Arlen, and interestingly, for those who are Arlen fans, it'll be at noon because Arlen's on the East Coast, so we're going to just keep with that noon time frame. Otherwise, have a great weekend.